Bob, a quick question. So you're
Yes, yes.
for the timing, you're the first one to speak, and then you introduce. So how?
Either way, yeah. I can, yeah. But I probably, yeah, I can open it up, Gladys, and then you can touch on some of the introductions as well or comments.
Okay. So you start and then, all right. Then you introduce Mario, and then I go to speakers.
Yeah. You can if you want, you can introduce them, Gladys. I'd be happy for you to do that. I think Mario will.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah.
Thanks. Can you make Val Reyes as co-host, please?
Maybe what we can do, Gladys, is I can, when Mario opens the message, as moderators, I guess we're introduce everyone, including Mario. So, I think you can introduce the discussants. Let's do it that way.
All right.
I'll introduce CP and Giselle and Joel.
Yes.
Yeah, Maria. Introduce the discussants.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. And then just remind them, the speakers, that they're given 10 minutes. So they will hear a chime after 9 minutes. That means they have 1 more minute to wrap up.
And they will not entertain questions right after their talk, right?
No, we'll have an open forum.
Yeah, we'll leave that in the
later.
Open forum.
Hello.
Yes, Ma'am Giselle.
Hello, Gladys and Robert.
Good morning.
As I understand it, Mario thinks that I should just speak ahead of CP. So I'll just give a brief introduction, about 3 minutes, and then CP will elaborate for about 7 minutes or so. Is that all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Giselle.
yeah. So it will be Ma'am Giselle first before C.
Question: are we playing a video of PASE introduction and Science J journal?
Mario, I think the journal they were planning to do that, but um, and do you
They
have
always
the
do that.
video?
Yes, Richmond should have the videos.
We have a PASE introduction, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe the journal we can play after or in the middle.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can do that too. We can do that too, yeah. Mon, can we do that? Or Anne? Yeah. They have all the videos, so just give the signal and then Richmond will play. Yeah. Or maybe we can do that now, Richmond.
Yeah,
the
we
PASE
can do
video.
that now.
Which one would like to do? Sir, or the science, sir?
Okay.
Double down on our efforts to catch up with science and technology and innovation. Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
The problem being that, while we have our PhDs here, there aren't enough of us. And everywhere else in the world, for research to be successful, you need a complete research group.
It's very important that the PASE members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that the Filipinos can have to do science with their PASE counterparts.
I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country.
The role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. Good evening. Today we have an exciting week. We are launching the Pro Science Week with the Philippine American Academy of Science in Engineering, or PAASE. And we hope you are looking forward to this week. Lots of interesting things that we can plan, discuss, and we value your participation. First of all, we'd like to thank in advance all our um, discussants, our opening talks to be given today and the following days. But more importantly, I hope this will be a productive week. My name is Gobet Advincula. I'm past PAASE president as well as a current board of director member. And my current affiliation, I'm a professor at University of Tennessee and scientist at Oak Ridge National Lab. And hopefully, among our colleagues at PAASE, this will be a fruitful experience as well as productive one. Now, let me introduce my co-moderator, Gladys. Can I give you the pleasure of introducing? She is the current Vice President of PAASE.
Yes. Good evening and good morning, everyone.
So before we start, a couple of things. One is we would like to ask our speakers to limit their time 10 minutes. And then we will have much more time during the open forum panel discussion to entertain more questions. Again, our purpose here is to encourage pro-science activism. We have many things to talk about, not only with things that we can suggest, perhaps implement and guide our leaders, but more importantly, as a community, we endeavor to have the common goal of enhancing STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math education, as well as its influence in our society and economy. So first, let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is immediate past president of PAASE, a very dedicated scientist, member of the National Academy of Science and Technology, previously, of course, a long-term scientist and good friend, Giselle, Professor Giselle Concepcion, and she's Professor Emeritus of UP Marine Science Institute. Then we have Professor Carlos Primo David, or CP. He is a professor of the UP National Institute of Geological Sciences, but he was past executive director of DOST Shared Innovation Council and officer in charge of the DOST Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. And CP, of course, is a long-term member of PAASE, very active in education and many initiatives in research for geosciences as well as agricultural engineering. And then we have our third speaker, again, a past president of PAASE, Joel, professor at the University of Arizona. He's the current director of GSAD, Global Initiative for Strategic Agriculture in Drylands, stalwart at PAASE, and has given us many insights, and perhaps one of the reasons why we're having this pro-science activism, which is to build a more ecosystems, in fact, with the tier one research universities in the Philippines. So let me give the floor to our speakers, and Gladys will have an opportunity to introduce our discussants after our speakers. So Giselle, may I give you the first slot?
Gobet, excuse me, can we ask President Mario first to give the opening remarks?
Yes, and let me give the floor to our president first before we give our speakers. Mario, apologize for that.
No, it's okay, Gobet. Thank you very much. Good morning from here in the United States, and of course, good evening, colleagues, friends, and everyone in the Philippines. In a few days, on March 2, is the third death anniversary of a friend and former colleague at the UP Center for Integrated and Development Studies, or CIDS, the late Dean of Science of UP Diliman, Dr. Perry Ong. When he was still alive, Perry was in front of the battle to get science into mainstream Philippine society, in convincing the youth to pursue a career in science and technology, to ensure that the work of Filipino scientists continue long after retirement, and in encouraging PhD holders to mentor the next generation. If he were alive today, he would surely have a seat on the table and speak his mind, just as some of our recently lost PAASE colleagues like Victoria Carpio Bernido and Terry Sarigumba would, or those who have left us a while back, including PAASE founding president Dr. Severino Co. Tonight and in the next few nights and beyond, we will honor them without mentioning their names, with our words, with our deeds. In the next few nights, the most important institutions and stakeholders will be represented in this great conversation we call a week of pro-science activism, finding common ground toward building a robust post-COVID ecosystem in the Philippines. From the current or former top leaders of science and technology to higher education, economic and industry sectors in Philippine government, to administrators of public and private institutions, and science and engineering faculty, to foundations, media, and community-based organizations. We shall hear various perspectives from them regarding STI-related problems or issues, action points, or policy solutions, and other details relevant to implementation of ideas and suggestions that will be raised. All these are in response to the two major catalysts of these conversations. First, the PAASE recommendations on science and technology human capital development by Professors C.P. David and former PAASE President and Professor Emeritus Giselle Concepcion, both from UP, and the paper on building R1 universities in the Philippines by former PAASE President and Professor at the University of Arizona, Joel Coelho. Tonight, we will hear perspectives from NEDA, DTI, Department of Agriculture, as well as the industry and industry academic partnership. Tomorrow, our discussants will be from CHED, the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges, and heads of universities such as UP and Carnegie Mellon University. On Wednesday, we shall listen to several PAASE members in their various capacities as administrators, research scientists, faculty of science and engineering. On Thursday, officials from current and former officers from NAST, DOST, and NRCP will share their perspectives. And last but not the least, on the final day of this series, on Friday, we will listen to representatives from local and international foundations, the media, and community-based organizations. This will not remain as conversations, though PAASE's plan is to write a white paper that will consolidate the views expressed in this fora, including new issues not articulated on the papers, potential reframing of recommendations articulated, and possible seeds of operational plans for solutions that will come out of these exchanges. We have heard the clarion call. There is a strong demand for action, and we will not back out from the challenge to define a clearer path forward for S&T and research and development in the country, and deciding remedies for perennial ailments affecting our science community. whether we invoke the kung hindi ngayon, kailan pa mantra, or former NEDA Secretary Ernesto Pernia's admonition for us to practice virtuous impatience, we know that the time to do this is now. Before I give the virtual floor to our moderators tonight, again, Dr. Gobet and PASE VP, Dr. Gladys Completo, I would like to acknowledge the help of our super proactive team of former PASE President Giselle Concepcion and of course, VP Gladys for putting the program together, all our presenters and discussants for generously sharing their time and talents, to our army of moderators, scribes, and rapporteurs, who will make sure that the sessions will be smoothly facilitated, adequately documented, and faithfully reported, and of course, to all our participants these 5 days. Together, we shall strive not to fail the next STEM PhD who's about to start a lab, or the next Filipino child who dreams to become a scientist. Maraming salamat po. Let the conversations begin.
Thank you so much, Mario, and thank you for all the efforts, especially in organizing and rallying up the troops for our very important week. So let us give the floor then to our first speaker, Giselle. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Drs. Gobet, President Mario, Vice President Gladys, and all attendees today, like-minded and like-hearted PASA members and friends who would like to see our country prosper through science and technology. So I've spoken so much in the last 2 years. I promise not to speak too much tonight and would rather listen to everything that others would like to say. So I'd just like to give a short background on the PASE S&T Human Capital Development paper, which was released in February 2011. And this was based on discussions in the PASE Fireside Chats, the very first 3. First, on innovation-centered strategic planning in Philippine universities. Second, on a robust S&T human capital development that is critical for economic recovery and resilience. And the third, on STEM education early on. And in these slides, in these posters, you will see the distinguished speakers that we had in the second and third episodes. In the first, this was graced by our deputy, our chief of party, Richard Abendan of Stride, and guests from the RTI Stride family. Now, the S&T HCD paper presents data as basis for strategic thrusts. So it's evidence-based. And these strategic thrusts come with proposed implementable actions. We always want to recognize antecedents or basis for more recent papers and other initiatives. So I would like to call attention to a 2006 position paper of PASE titled The Role of S&T in Economic Development. And the lead author there was Dr. Pernia, together with 5 of us. And this was made the basis for our campaign to get the National Science Complex in UP Diliman established. And at this point, I'd like to recall that our late Dean, Perry Ong, whom Mario so nicely mentioned and remembered today, had it in his mind to get more funding to run the National Science Complex. That was my last conversation with him. In 2016, we produced the UP Knowledge paper titled Knowledge-Based Development and Governance, and many elements of the S&T HCD paper were found in the 2016 UP paper. In 2018, PASE prepared a proposal submitted to the NEDA and the Innovation Council, and it was the creation of regional STI ecosystems. And the lead author was Dr. Joel Coelho, with contributions from Dr. Advincula and myself. So this S&T Human Capital Development paper was delivered to 10 congressmen and 10 senators in February, and Speaker Velasco responded positively and met with the 6 authors of this paper and requested that we prepare a proposal and budget, which we submitted in May 2021. I will leave it to my co-author, the first author, Dr. C.P. David, to expound on the 3 strategic thrusts in this S&T HCD paper, which had been approved by the PASA BOD. Namely, improve STEM education at the secondary level, increase PhD faculty and research productivity in regional SUCs, and strengthen academe-industry linkage. Examples of ongoing PASA projects along these 3 strategic thrusts are: 1, Dr. David is preparing for the National STEM Bee competition in July and meeting with many grade 7 students in public high schools. Dr. Mario Santo Domingo and I have hosted meetings with so far 4 Southern Taiwanese universities who are willing to host our faculty from our SUCs and HEIs for their master's and PhD studies. And thirdly, with Dr. Rachave, who's a speaker tonight, we are developing micro-master's courses for industry. So at this point, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I'd like to hand over the floor to Dr. C.P. David. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle. I only have a few minutes left, and so I'll go straight to one of the projects that we wanted to do. But essentially, how I see activism is, if we simply define activism as to vigorously campaign for much needed change, then I see that only goes just one step further from just conceiving what would be possible solutions to a problem. And so in our little group consisting of PAASE members, Al Serafica and Cheryl Monterola, we wanted to do it a little bit further and look at the S&T ecosystem, particularly the human capital, and see where the gaps in terms of this ecosystem. We chose to look at our STEM education at the secondary level. And so this was how the PAASE's National STEM Bee program was conceived. Currently, what we have are 94 schools in the program. And out of these 94 schools, we have 139 teacher coaches, science and math teachers who are undergoing regular training from UP NISMED, and 905 grade 7 students. Now, the STEM Bee program is a national quiz bee program that is now authorized and certified by DepEd as a learning program and supported by many of the partners since PAASE launched it. At the surface, it's just a quiz bee that will look for the best and the brightest students in the country. But if you dig a little bit deeper, what we actually do is to augment the competencies of our students by providing new online materials to them. Secondly, because we provide quizzes to them on a weekly basis since the last week of December, we are also able to collect a lot of information about competencies in math and science, some of the problems that we see in terms of how they learn the topics, and so on and so forth. For example, we have 2 learning materials that we pass on to the students, Khan Academy and 88 Tuition, which is a video-based learning material for math and science from Singapore. And we compare, for those students who did Khan Academy for that week, how did they score in terms of the quizzes that we provide, and what essentially what is the improvement that we see. So as you can see for Khan Academy, those who did it, those who went through the material gained about 6% in their scores. For ETA tuition, it's about 5% in their scores. So we can do all these metrics, and data science because we have all these information at hand. Also, when we look at the different questions that we provide, we also learn a lot about how they learn, what are the things that are being taught at the high school level, and things that we may be able to correct moving forward. For example, we know that memorized materials, especially for science topics like biology and astronomy, our kids are able to memorize lists and parts and all sorts of stuff. For example, a question about the gastrointestinal system, amazingly 85% of our learners were able to get the correct answer. However, when we do math problems, particularly math problems with multiple conditions and compound sentences, even if the math operation that is required is only arithmetic, just plus and minus, only 55% of them are able to answer. And this tells us a very important point, and that is the language that is being used for teaching math and science is actually a barrier. So we have to do something about that. For math, 2 or 3 step word problems, even if it's just arithmetic, is very difficult for our students. They are used to straightforward questions like solve this and this is the equation. However, if you look at this particular question here, involving fractions, you have to do 3/8 of the 216, and then the remaining balls, which would be 5/8 of the 216, you will have to compute again, and then you subtract that from the total number of balls. And for this type of question, they won't be able to answer it anymore. As you can see, only 38% were able to answer it. And finally, this is the main competencies being taught at the grade 7 level: fractions, percentage, ratios, and so on, as well as introductory algebra. They are not able to comprehend this. And so what this tells us is that there's no use moving to more complex math topics beyond grade 7 because they have not mastered these fundamental topics. And so we provided all these information. They are all data driven to DepEd, and they're very interested in some of the findings. In fact, they know of these problems, except that they don't have the necessary evidence to tell their teachers on the ground that these are the actual problems. So at least in part, in our little way in Paase, we're able to provide the much needed studies that DepEd actually need to do first, before implementing any curriculum change or teacher training programs and so on and so forth. And so this is going well beyond what we have started out at the start of the STEMB program. And we hope to continue this further as we do our next run of STEMB. And hopefully we provide a little dent in the competencies of our students in math and science. So I'll stop there. Maraming salamat po, everybody.
Thank you so much, CP and Giselle. We are now going to turn the table to Joel.
Yes, I'm gonna share this now. Okay, so good evening, everyone, to the Philippines. It's I think a little past 5 a.m. here, or almost 6 a.m. in Arizona. So good morning to you from here, and good evening there. And thank you, CP. Thank you, Giselle. We really appreciate all of the input that you've been giving Paase over the many years. But anyway, before I start, I just would like to have this disclaimer that our goal here really is to join forces together and join our brain cells together so that hopefully we could come up with constructive solutions on how we can provide solutions and meet the challenges of science and technology in the Philippines. So this is by no means a criticism of anyone, of any administrator, and so on and so forth, because really, I think the Philippines is extremely fortunate to have the public servants and officials that, DOST, DTI, Board of Investments, Department of Agriculture, and the other agencies have today. So again, this is just to kind of look at the entire system, figure out what the challenges are and what the potential solutions are. So I thought this morning here, I would use the time to kind of give a description again of science and technology as an economic ecosystem, because we really have to start seeing it that way so that we could find the appropriate solutions to the challenges facing science and technology in the Philippines. The fact of the matter is that science and technology is not only an academic discipline, it does not only refer to a profession, its boundary does not lie within the physical boundaries or fences of an academic institution or a university, but it is an economic system, and therefore it is national as well as global in terms of its reach and extent. So let me start with this cartoon here. So this is our university here. So it may be UP, it may be any other state university or even college for that matter. So it's a very novel institution. It's educating graduates, producing graduates. And of course, there is the funding, which is provided by the national government, usually in the form of its appropriation on an annual basis. So this is the simplistic way of looking at a university in the Philippines. So you might wonder, well, where does the national government get the funding then, the appropriation that is allocated to the universities? Well, they come from folks. So they come from the Filipino workers, and they pay their income taxes. And they come from businesses as well, so including Jollibee and SM. And of course, this is very simplistic. The economic landscape of the Philippines is sophisticated and very well diversified. So there are many sources for the national revenue. But out of that revenue comes the allocation that is on a yearly basis appropriated for the state universities and colleges in the Philippines. So now what happens to the graduates? Well, some of the graduates actually are absorbed by the state universities and colleges as teachers, as professors. Some of them go into the general economy to find work or jobs, but regretfully, a significant portion of them also go out of the country. And so that is referred to as brain drain. And in a way, it is really a brain drain because it's extremely useful for the country to be able to retain its graduates, not only in the bachelor's level, but in the master's and the PhD, because if they could be gainfully employed and contribute their talents and their innovations within the Philippine economy, that would be to the great gain of the Philippine economy. So anyway, to kind of alleviate this, thankfully we have government agencies in the Philippines, including the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Agriculture, and they provide funding as well to universities to do research and development. And that is why quite a number of universities now in the Philippines have started developing their research and development function. And of course, I must say, even though I graduated from UP, it's not out of bias, but the fact of the matter is UP is well developed in terms of its research and development capability, which is world class, together with other universities in the Philippines as well. Okay, now, so, and then thankfully to the Department of Trade and Industry, the Board of Investments, the PESA, they have started, well, they've been doing this now for decades, and that is they actually did their responsibility and they reached out to the global economy to incentivize and to attract global tech companies to come to the Philippines to do their manufacturing operations, or at least part of those manufacturing operations in the Philippines. And this range from different sectors, from the semiconductor to electronics to medical devices to shipbuilding and so on and so forth. And it's still expanding. And of course, these companies pay taxes to the national government, which of course help increase the overall pot of money for the nation. And that helps as well in terms of sustaining the allocations that go into the state universities and colleges. And not only that, they help definitely increase the annual export of the country. Which is great for the economy because it has its own multiplier effects. Okay, so now here's the story here. But still, there's still a lot of graduates who end up going perhaps to the wrong job within the local economy, so they become underemployed, and a lot of them go abroad, and so that is brain drain. So in a way, there is a need to kind of close this loop. And how do we do that? Well, part of the answer would, let me add this here. So now universities are also promoting programs on startups, and that is great as well. And that is helpful to the economy, except that two things, the death rate really for startups, at least here in North America, is about 70% to 80%. So not all these startups will make it. And these startups are micro businesses or small businesses, so they cannot possibly employ significant number of graduates, at least initially. So again, it's very important for the economy, but it's not the panacea that we're looking for. So what can we do? Well, here's one possibility here. And one big prospect, actually. So this will be through the Department of Trade and Industry, the Board of Investments, PEZA, in cooperation, of course, with the DOST and NEDA, is to establish the research and development sector in the country as an economic sector. And this is by, this can be started, for instance, by talking with the many technology companies that are already operating in the country, in the Philippines, because they're doing their manufacturing operations. They could perhaps be incentivized as well to bring in their industrial R&D to the Philippines as well, because that is commonly done worldwide now. So if that could happen, then there could be a research and development sector, a science and technology research and development sector in the country as well. And so that would lead to a market for the graduates of Philippine state universities and colleges, particularly even the master's and the PhD levels, because those are the ones with the R&D capabilities. So that's good. They could be employed locally, and they could spend their money locally as well, which is great for the Philippine economy. And of course, there could be, and this is highly desirable here, is for these global companies that are doing research and development in the Philippines to have direct R&D relationships with the R&D arms of the research universities in the Philippines, which is why it's important to develop Research One universities in the Philippines. And not only that, of course, these global companies operating in the country will need procurement. And those procurement services can be provided for by local Filipino companies. And these startups here, and this is the common story, in many parts of the world, a lot of the local startups actually have this business relationship with this global research and development sector within that country, or sometimes they're even acquired by it. So if it's a tech company, and let's say we have Google or we have Microsoft in the country, if it's a really good startup company that is technology compatible with the business of, say, Microsoft or Google, more than likely they will be acquired handsomely by those global companies, which is great. And not only that, but the presence of this industrial R&D sector in the country would then lead to this direct collaboration between the manufacturing sector in the Philippines, which is globally based, as well as that in the Philippines. And that would cause the manufacturing sector in the Philippines to be transformed as well, to go from regular manufacturing into advanced manufacturing, and even highlight, let's say, make it a green type of advanced manufacturing. And again, that increases the export of the country. So this is how the science and technology ecosystem, or as an economic system, could be closed. So this is closing the loop. So right now, what is missing is this industrial R&D sector, which is a highly lucrative sector. And if that is built in the Philippines, that would really solve a lot of the challenges currently being faced by universities in the Philippines. And that would be an impetus as well for universities, research universities in the Philippines to develop to become Research One universities. And of course, that would also mean more money for the Philippine government in terms of business taxes. So you could, one way to look at this as well is in terms of building a plane. Building a plane is complex and it's being done concurrently, not one after another. It's assembled pretty much as a whole airplane with all of the parts put together. And so you could, by analogy, for instance, the flight deck could represent the science and technology talents. The landing gear would be the research and development facilities and infrastructure. The wings would be the Research One universities. The fuselage would be the Philippine-based science and technology R&D industry sectors, the global and the local companies. The engines would be the government and global industry funding for research and development. And then the tail, or the vertical and the horizontal stabilizers would represent the government R&D incentives, policies, for global and local companies. When you've got all of these parts joined together, well, what you have is an actual plane that could fly. And in terms of the benefits of that to the country, that would translate into various tax revenues for the country. Local science and technology jobs for the graduates of the country, building Philippine global R&D sector, Philippine R&D and manufacturing sector synergy, multiplier effects on the Philippine economy, development of the Philippine regions, and so on and so forth. I think I'm going to stop here. Okay, one last thing here. These are the 5 steps for the economic development of every emerging economy in the world today. Starts with agriculture and mining, and then manufacturing. So the Philippines is right here, which is the takeoff stage. To go to the next stage, we have to add research and development to manufacturing, and that would be drive to innovation or value creation. And then after that, there's the drive to sustain growth, where you have high technology innovation and true knowledge-based value creation. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that this piqued your curiosity and your knowledge as well, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, and really like the way you frame it with very nice charts and very relevant examples. And certainly this is a lot of food or fodder for our discussions today. Definitely, technology plays a very important role. The willingness, the will to carry out this mission means that there's a lot of stakeholders that need to have buy-in. And I think we have the right mix here, the right priorities as well. With our current challenges in energy, geopolitical aspects, we really need to step up in terms of preparing for the future. So at this point, I would like to, of course, acknowledge the history that Giselle laid out in terms of how we've come to this point, our past endeavors and achievements with the science complex and initiatives, and of course for CP for giving more details on developing the education ecosystem that will necessitate this leap. So hopefully, let me remind you that a lot of this was actually inspired by Joel's initiative in pushing us to go to the next step beyond our first projects and accomplishments into having more tier 1 research universities. But really, as you can see by the way he explained it, it's much more than that. It's contributing to the economy as well as the progress in society to be competitive. So with this, I'd like to give the floor to Gladys, who will be introducing our discussants, and then the rest of the time in this first first session, we will have more opportunities for questions, answers, and discussions. Gladys?
Yeah, thank you. Gobet. So again, thank you, CP, Ma'am Giselle, and Joel for the comprehensive talks. And Joel really is challenging us. Not just Joel, he really presented well what Philippines need right now. And to discuss more and to give their insights, we have several discussants tonight. So we have 6 discussants. So we have 2 former NEDA secretaries. So I would like to start with the introduction of our first discussant. So unlike in the first part where all of the speakers were introduced at the same time, I will be introducing each speaker, each discussant after every talk. So let me just remind the discussants that you have 7 minutes to present, and you will hear a gentle chime after 6 minutes. That means you have 1 minute to wrap up your talk. So the first speaker is Dr. Ernesto Pernia. He is a professor emeritus of this UP School of Economics, and he was the NEDA secretary from 2016 to 2020. So let us all hear from Dr. Pernia.
Good morning to our colleagues in the US, and good evening to our colleagues in the Philippines. Thank you, Dr. Mario, the president of PAASE, and then Gobet Advincula for starting the the introduction of the speakers, and then Giselle, CP David, and then Joel Coelho, which is whose presentation was really kind of magical and very well shown and very lofty in terms of objectives and goals. Okay, I am I was given the terms of reference for my presentation by President Mario Santo Domingo of PAASE, and essentially I was told to present what are the challenges, the issues and problems regarding science and technology, research and development in the Philippines, and what might be the proposals toward addressing these challenges and issues. Next. Yes. Okay. My presentation is rather rudimentary. It's a kind of a come down from the lofty presentation of Dr. Joel Coelho. And so I start with the reality on the ground. And I'm talking about the underlying factors that that are relevant to problems and issues in the Philippines. And I'm saying that a root cause of many of the Philippines' problems has inter alia, very underlined inter alia, because there are other root causes. Has been its failed population management policy, the exception in ASEAN, leading to a runaway population growth, constraining economic growth, employment and incomes, and resulting in the highest poverty incidence in the region. Okay, some problems and challenges. With a predominantly young population, median age at 24 years, DepEd necessitates the largest budget among government agencies. Yet spending per student and teacher is paltry, measly. Hence, the quantity-quality trade-off suggests the kind of basic education that feeds into higher education in our country. Not to mention all SUCs, state universities and colleges. They don't charge tuition anymore. So they have to cough up from the government budget to spend for the operations and the programs of SUCs, which means that they require larger budgets annually. All this means the spending for DepEd and CHED. All this means that the government is financially straitjacketed for science and technology, research and developments, requirements and spending. So, secondly, a measly government budget for science and technology, research and development. As you know, it was only at 0.15% of GDP in 2016, the bottom among the original ASEAN countries. The Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022 targets to bring the 0.15% of GDP to 0.5% of GDP by 2022. But it's already 2022, and this is unlikely to be achieved. A third problem or challenge, the total number of Filipino patents registered was only 31 in 2016. The Philippine Development Plan targets 42 in 2022. And again, if we compare ourselves with our ASEAN neighbors, that would also be the lowest. And then a fourth problem or challenge is that researchers in full-time equivalent per million population is they number about 270 in 2013. The Philippine Development Plan targets 300 in 2022. I'm not sure how many have been achieved by this year and by the end of the year. So these are some hard proposals or maybe aspirations. Number one, I would suggest ramping up science and technology research and development budget to 0.5%. So 0.5% of GDP in 1 or 2 years and higher thereafter. Because as I said earlier, this has not been achieved. This is unlikely to be achieved in 2022. So we have to aim to achieve this in the next year or so, in the next year or two. Then we need to provide incentives and rewards for researchers and patent producers, respectively. A third proposal is to vigorously promote collaboration between and among government, industry, and academia, especially through the National Innovation Council's National Innovation Agenda and Strategy document, NIASD. A fourth proposal is to promote public-private partnerships for setting up R1 universities. I don't think the government by itself, the government budget, can have the resources, can afford to set up R1 universities. And so we should really bring in the private sector so that they and maybe perhaps they can be incentivized through tax deductions for those who are going to participate, the businesses or the corporations going to participate in setting up R1 universities. And this is the kind of uh, ecosystem that Joel Coelho described to us graphically. Our fifth proposal is to open up education sector to facilitate partnerships between the Philippines and foreign universities to sharply enhance and internationalize quality of higher education, as in progressive Asian countries. As you know, these partnerships between international and local Philippine universities is quite common already. Singapore has it, Thailand has it, Malaysia, and then even China. China has foreign universities partnering with Chinese universities. So why can't we do it? We are actually more, pro-Western or more Westernized than these other countries. A sixth proposal is, okay, and this is the supreme overarching requirement for the country. We really have a need for a sufficiently knowledgeable, appreciative, and supportive, besides, of course, being competent, upright, integer, meaning not broken, meaning incorrupt, and with genuine love for country, national leader. And everybody should be hoping and praying for this kind of leader in May 2022, May 9 elections 2022. And of course, with a cabinet and legislators put together, will strongly and seriously promote, strongly and seriously push to achieve numbers 1 to 5 proposals, the foregoing proposals that I mentioned, and perhaps other proposals. And with this, I would thank you for bearing with me on a rudimentary discussion of the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pernia. Thank you for presenting the problems that we are experiencing right now. Are very low budget, right? And very few researchers in our country. And also you propose a lot of solutions to this, mainly 6, but you enumerated 6 proposals. And the most important, aside from increasing, of course, our budget to 0.5%, it's very important that we set up, how do we set up the R1 university? One way is to doing tax deductions for participating business corporations. And I totally agree with your proposal, your 5th proposal, that is, we need to collaborate, or we need help from international universities, right? We need to internationalize quality of higher education. And this is very timely, your last proposal, that is, we need to have a government that will support this. So thank you for that, Dr. Pernia, and then we will proceed to the next speaker. If you have questions, please write your questions or comments in the chat box, and we will have our open forum. So our next speaker is Dr. Dante Canlas. He is a professor emeritus of the UP School of Economics, and he was also the NEDA Director General from 2001 to 2002. He also served as Socio-Economic Planning Secretary and concurrently Director General of NEDA under Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. He also served several positions, as you can see here in this slide. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Dante Canlas.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. This is my first participation in a PASE event. I was just accepted early this year as a full member of PASE, and uh, what I have to contribute today, I don't think is not much. When I received the invitation from Dr. Mario Santo Domingo, I prepared a three-page statement, and it's entitled Building an Educated and Scientific Manpower for Economic Growth and Development. I didn't have the chance to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. So what I'll do is just read from this short statement, and then if the organizers would like to distribute the statement later, that will just be fine with me. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate all of the resource persons, as well as Dr. Pernia, my colleague at the School of Economics, for their insightful presentations. Okay, what I'll do in my three-page statement is just to review some fundamental ideas in economics that are very supportive of building an educated and scientific manpower, particularly because of the importance of this particular human capital for economic growth and development. Let me start by framing the issues, and then discuss some policies that we currently observe. Some I think are all acceptable, except there are some pros and cons for some of them. So let me start by saying that building a critical mass of educated and scientific manpower is widely accepted in the economics profession as a worthy undertaking in the quest for sustained economic growth and development. It is a consensus stemming from two empirical regularities observed in several microeconometric and macroeconomic studies. The first empirical regularity pertains to the positive relationship between earnings and education seen in a large body of work in human capital. Two prominent authors, Irene R. Gary Becker, a Nobel laureate in economics, and Jacob Minzer. And in all of the studies that I've read, the rate of return from a particular level of education, whether it's basic, secondary, and tertiary, may be derived from an earnings function that makes use of individual and household data. And it is shown that investing in any of the three levels yields a high rate of return. The second empirical regularity emanates from sources of growth studies using aggregate data at the country level. A decomposition analysis of output growth identifies two major sources: an increase in the two factors of production, namely labor and capital, and total factor productivity, or TFP. TFP is taken as a residual, and its growth far outstrips the growth of labor and capital. In fact, it is also known as technological progress. Two scholars who have done intellectually compelling studies in this field are Robert Solow, another Nobel Prize winner based at the MIT, and Dale Jorgensen at Harvard. TFP has once been described as a zone of ignorance, and as a result, much academic work has gone into shedding light on the factors behind TFP. This is often described as technological progress, as I said earlier, and underpinning technological progress is investment in R&D, research and development, which hinges on having a critical mass of technical and scientific manpower working for the most part in universities, research swan level, and think tanks, whether public or private. One issue that has emerged in the field of economic growth is whether developing countries like the Philippines can catch up with the mature developed countries. This field of interest is popularly termed economic convergence. And the answer is yes, but it's conditional on being able to build an educated and scientific manpower base comparable to those of developed countries. This is the case of conditional convergence. And so both developed countries that seek to maintain their current economic leadership and the developing countries or emerging economies that want to catch up with developed ones invest in expanding their educated and scientific manpower base. So the challenge is, I think, what has been raised by our speakers. How can developing countries like the Philippines build an educated and scientific manpower in support of sustained economic growth? Let me start with doing that in higher education. Investing in higher education is illustrative. It is at this level where scientific manpower doing a good deal of R&D is located. This is, however, not to ignore the value of basic education. It seems clear, for instance, that to be able to minimize dropout rates at the tertiary level, raising the quality of basic education is a critical investment. And in pursuit of quality enhancement of basic education, the Philippines has introduced the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, popularly known as the K-12 law. This law introduced 2 years of kindergarten plus 12 years of basic education. Primary 6 years, junior high 4 years, and senior high 2 years. Impact studies, however, have been limited at this stage. Not enough is known about how effective the K-12 law has been, and this gap needs to be closed. The law aimed at enhancing basic education is government supported. The positive externalities or third parties spillover effects from education are well recognized, inducing the government to support education with no out-of-pocket cost to families who enroll their children in public schools. Higher education, meanwhile, is largely financed internally by families. There are government subsidies, but these are largely directed at state colleges and universities. And we know, Dr. Pernia has already mentioned, how thin the budget is for many of these SUCs because there are just many of them. And there are too few centers of excellence while there are several SUCs scattered all over the archipelago. Economies have shown interest in the government behavior of households. A typical point of departure is to investigate the effects of cost factors on enrollment in higher education. And the usual findings: high costs deter college enrollment. Tuition fee policy and use of subsidies are thus tried to determine how effectively such policies contribute to building an educated and scientific manpower. But in addition, questions have been raised about whether or not such tuition fee policy is equitable and efficient. If it goes only to SUCs, definitely it's not equitable, because so what about students enrolled in private schools, which have very good science departments too? Now, so one way that one proposal is, of course, to introduce a loan market for higher education. Loan markets, because in the first place, there are missing markets for loans to college, for going to college and to universities. And then we know that college graduates are able to capture the returns from investments in higher education. So why not give it as a loan? But of course, we have to avoid many of the pitfalls that beset even the most developed countries. And now they're into loan forgiveness already for loans to college students. So the Philippines has introduced this free tuition policy in SUCs to enhance access to quality tertiary education. But again, the quality is questionable because there are just far too many of them, and they quarrel over a small share of the budget, government budget. And one anomalous outcome has been there's a migration of students from private colleges and universities to SUCs, causing a reduction of enrollment in the private universities while putting much pressure on the budgets of SUCs. So tuition fee policy is the pre-one, will have to be restudied. Possible amendments will have to be considered. And we have to accept that it's an imperfect policy for building or enhancing the size of our educated and scientific manpower. And so let's examine the other policies, particularly the funding support to Research One universities. These are the complementary policies to a tuition fee policy. One, this was mentioned already by all our speakers, the partnership between universities and industry. Much of the progress in, for instance, the information technology revolution in the US is traceable to this mode of partnership. The mutual benefits from the partnership, evident from the US experience, seem clear. Universities, on one hand, are able to carry out basic research that broadens and deepens knowledge, enhancing their institutional reputation as centers of excellence in advanced research. Industries, on the other hand, are able to commercialize the findings from advanced research, thereby meeting the profit motive. These partnerships are also occurring in, for example, fields like biotech and genomics. And then there's also tapping the big private foundations for research grants, another item that was mentioned by our speakers. These foundations, mostly private, generally seek to advance their specific research interests in, for example, cancer research. And they also donate professorial chairs to universities dedicated to supporting the advanced research of many scientists. Another policy is really enhancing government support to research and development. We all understand that knowledge production is a public good. Once consumed by one industry, for example, knowledge is not diminished and it can be consumed by the other industries. As a result, there is what is known as learning by doing, and at the same time, there are the increasing returns as the knowledge, which is not diminished by usage from one industry to another, gets transmitted across several industries. And this is the one that leads to sustained growth and development of the country. And so it is important to consider, I think DTI is one of our discussions this day, to really consider a new industrial policy, particularly looking at the industries that must be incentivized, those industries that are characterized by learning by doing and at the same time are able to deliver scale economies. So these are some of the policies that should complement tuition fee policies. So just to sum up and to close this statement, there exists best practice techniques that can be embraced to expand the educated and scientific manpower base of a developing country like the Philippines, seeking to transform itself into a newly industrializing economy. Such manpower base needs to be scaled up in the Philippines, obviously. However, overcoming tight budgetary constraints in government hinges similarly on being able to elect. This is an idea that Ernie mentioned in the case of the president. Presidential leadership really matters. So it hinges similarly on being able to elect to office a sizable set of political leaders who will submerge self-interest in the public, in the service of the public interest, such as knowledge production and then allow science to dominate politics. Listening to the proposed S&T Capital Human Development, I understand that this has made much progress, including presentations to members of Congress, but I don't know whether or not after the presentation, many of those legislators, place it in the agenda, particularly during discussion on the national government budget. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Canlas. So we heard from two former NEDA secretaries, and if you've noticed, they presented very similar proposals, and also they presented similar problems, and they have focused on restudying the free tuition fee policy, because it really causes problem because we don't have enough budget and we have a lot of SUCs. And Dr. Canlas suggested that maybe we can consider having loan markets for higher education. And to have funding support to R1 universities, we should have partnership between universities and industry. And we should tap private foundations for research grants and enhance government support to R&D, which was all of these were also suggested by Dr. Pernia. And last but not least, which is very timely, we all hope that we'll have new political leaders who will be willing to submerge self-interest in the favor of the public interest and allow science to dominate politics. So thank you very much, Dr. Canlas and Dr. Pernia. We now move on to the next discussants. If you have comments and questions, please feel free to write in the chat box. Now I would like to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Rafaelita Aldaba, who is the Undersecretary for the Competitiveness and Innovation Group, Department of Trade and Industry. So she is also a governor of the Philippine Board of Investments, the country's primary industry development arm, and lead investment promotion agency, in short for IPA. She is leading DTI's initiatives in preparing industries for the fourth industrial revolution and digital transformation, establishing regional inclusive innovation centers, developing new creative industries, and growing a robust startup ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Aldaba.
Thank you very much. Let me just, I have a few slides which I want to share. Okay. I hope you're able to see my screen. Yeah, okay. Good evening and good morning, everyone. I would like to share with you our efforts in terms of upgrading not only manufacturing, but as well as other major industries in the economy, and linking and connecting these industries together. So I'd like to start by first providing an overview of the emerging technology landscape in the country, but the focus would really be on our new industrial policy, which is centered on science, technology, and innovation as we grow globally competitive and innovative industries. Well, using new technologies like AI, robotics, advanced manufacturing, industrial biotechnology, nanoelectronics, satellite, and cognitive technologies, we can create new products or solutions, particularly in establishing smart buildings, advanced manufacturing, precision agriculture, and so on. The National Academy of Science and Technology conducted a study. This is Foresight 2050. And they identified the current and emerging technologies that could guide and shape the country's development pathway in the next 3 decades. 12 areas have been identified, and these are shown on the slide. Well, all these areas are aligned with the priorities of the government, and we would actually like to see advanced manufacturing in the Pagtanaw list, because we see manufacturing as crucial for the country's industrialization. And we conducted a survey actually to look at the technology utilization across different sectors within manufacturing all over the country. And what we found was that the highest technology utilization is in sectors such as non-metallic products, paper, computer, electronic, optical products, motor vehicles, and pharmaceutical products. In terms of their specific areas of focus, technology investments by firms are taking place mostly in cybersecurity, quality, and manufacturing activity management. Well, amid the pandemic, as we all know, there were many Filipino startups who were able to quickly pivot to new activities, and using these new technologies, they provided actually solutions to help government in addressing some of the pandemic issues. And the acceleration of digital transformation actually paved the way for the growth of digital economy in the Philippines. I won't mention the numbers anymore, they are on the slide, but let me mention the first one. The adoption of AI in the country could actually create revenues amounting to $92 billion US dollars. That's around 12% of our GDP by 2030. So taking all these new developments into account, our new industrial strategy is given by the slide that you can see. This is the I3S, or Inclusive Innovative Industrialization. I3S aims to grow globally competitive and innovative industries with science, technology, and innovation at the front and center of our new industrial policies. There are 3 major goals. The first is the acceleration of capital accumulation. So we start here by attracting more capital investments, R&D, innovation, advanced digital production. And very important, of course, is human resource development that would focus in terms of building our capacity, not only in new and future skills, but as well as in our research capabilities. The second is structural transformation through the movement of resources to knowledge and SCI intensive activities. And you can see on the slide, we're going to measure this through the increases in the GDP share of knowledge and SCI intensive sectors. Of course, Industry 4.0 technologies would also be important, along with integrating our production systems and investments towards clean and efficient production. And the third is inclusive, innovative industrialization through diversified exports, expansion of our local production base, regional transformation, such that we would be able to transform our traditional agriculture to more modern agribusiness and manufacturing. The priority sectors that we've identified are also seen on the slide. These are divided into 3 tiers. Tier 1 would be activities to rebuild the economy. Mostly these are basic needs like food, health, water, and so on. Tier 2 would be activities that would support more competitive and resilient economy, which would include the processing of green metals, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and including intermediate goods such as those in chemicals, iron and steel, plastic, and textiles. Tier 3 would be the activities that would accelerate our economic transformation, which would include, of course, the adoption of advanced manufacturing technologies and other Industry 4.0 technologies, along with high-tech agriculture and biotech, R&D and innovation, blue economy, and creative economy. There was a discussion a while ago among our presenters with respect to the incentives to be provided. So incentives would actually, we have a new scheme. This is called the CREATE, or Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises. The CREATE is actually aligned with our new industrial policy, as the incentives are being geared towards innovative projects that would rebuild and make our industries more competitive and resilient, and support the acceleration towards economic transformation. A menu of incentives is actually being provided, and this would include income tax holiday, special corporate income tax, enhanced deductions, which would include additional deduction on R&D, on labor, training, including power. Okay. And in the next slide, I'm just showing you a description of the incentives. Again, this would be that would be granted, and these incentives would depend on the level of technology of the activity, as well as its location. Tier 3 incentives are the highest, and they would range from 16 to 17 years for export activities, and from 11 to 12 years for domestic-oriented activities. Well, just to give you a flavor of the activities to be covered under Tier 3, this would be activities that would include those that are using new technologies. You can see the technologies on the slide: robotics, industrial biotech, advanced manufacturing, big data, and so on. So these are technology and digital intensive activities in electronics, machinery and transport equipment, knowledge intensive services, along with the commercialization of IP and R&D. To accelerate innovation and MSME digitalization, we are also planning to build a center for AI research. This would serve as hub for data scientists and researchers to perform collaborative AI R&D consultancy services, create AI tech products, conduct data literacy programs, and we would like to use this as a showcase in order for us to attract leading global firms to set up their R&D activities in the country. And the plan is really not for government to be implementing or to be managing this center, but for a public-private partnership to be formed. And we're already in the process of discussing with some big domestic companies, conglomerates, and many of them are actually interested in investing in this, in the building of this center. So this is my last slide. In terms of our digital transformation, Industry 4.0 plans, the focus really is on the people. We keep the people at the center of all our fourth industrial revolution plans, with a focus on inclusive growth and enabling people at every level of society to take part in building an innovative and creative future. We see digital transformation as only 10% technology, and it's really about the people, 90% human. And so the upgrading process would require the development of new capabilities and human resource development to ensure the availability of manpower and talents. It's also important for us to invest in education and human capital, particularly R&D scientists and engineers, which would be really crucial if we want to attract and develop more higher value added activities. Of course, the other important elements in terms of establishing our innovation ecosystem would require better protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights. And to promote innovation, we need design, creativity, creation of incubation centers for SMEs and startups, efficient logistics and infrastructure, and the development of parts, supplies, and material sector to support our industries. Yeah, I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Algaba. So we heard what DTI is planning to improve our science and technology, and of course they're still embracing the people-centered digital translation, that we should focus on the people and the talent. And now we would like to move on to the insights of the Department of Agriculture. So I would like to introduce the next speaker, that is Dr. Leo Sebastian, who is the Undersecretary and Designate and Chief of Staff of the Department of Agriculture. He received several awards and prestigious awards, including the 10 Outstanding Young Men and Outstanding Young Scientist in Plant Breeding Award for Research Management and JICA Presidential Award. His leadership skill is complemented with expertise in agriculture, genetics, agriculture, chemistry, and plant breeding. Let us all welcome Dr. Leo Sebastian.
Can you play the video, please?
Yes, our
Magandang gabi o kaya magandang umaga sa ating mga kasama sa PAASE. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I took stock of your input in implementing the Philippine Innovation Act and formulating strategies to push S&T and R&D forward to develop a well-written 2022 PAASE white paper. I then want to put forward 3 main challenges and propose solutions. I had started as a young researcher and knew professional growth and success as a research manager. Now, in my current capacity as contributor to Philippine policy making in agriculture, I hope my long career and experience could bring to bear some solutions to the 3 main challenges. The first challenge: we need to sustain support for human resource and research for development activities. In the late 80s, some Rockefeller Foundation officials were reluctant to consider Philippine agriculture in its international program for rice biotechnology, or IPRB. They had the impression that the Philippines would not be able to sustain research in rice biotechnology. But they went in regardless. They supported human resource capacity development. Several of us received fellowships to study abroad. When we came back, the Rockefeller Foundation provided research grants to start local work. Furthermore, there were institutional grants provided to DA Pilrice. This, along with the corporate structure of Pilrice, sustained the rice biotechnology research of the institution. Years later, I sat among the Rockefeller Foundation's evaluation team. We assessed the outcome of the rice biotechnology program's human resource capacity building in India, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, China, and South Korea. In China at the time, in 1999, most of the Rockefeller Fellows did not return after completing their degrees. Only 5% of the fellows returned at that time. Most opted to stay in the US with their host laboratories or other host laboratories. We asked Chinese officials if this worried them. It did not. They gave a couple of reasons. First, they had an army of qualified staff they can send abroad. Second, they knew that these Chinese researchers were learning ideas and insights that they can eventually repatriate to China. Later on, we learned that China launched programs to lure Chinese researchers abroad back to China. These research repatriates were given laboratories and funding to pursue their work in their home country. In the Philippines, with the exception of PhilRice and a few other institutions, returning staff are often left to fend for themselves. They get frustrated with relatively low compensation, limited research funding, and lack of facilities. For many, the next stage of their career fell outside their field of specialization. They would settle into administrative work as directors or deans of educational institutions. While equally noble, these administrative occupations did not play to their strength as researchers and did not put to work the ideas they got abroad. I believe the enthusiasm of our scholars and fellows will attract them back to the Philippines. We need programs that will sustain and rekindle their appetite for research and national service. We cannot wait for them or obligate them to be balik scientists. If we cannot pay them more, we should at least provide them with good research direction, funding, and facilities. This was my observation and sentiment when I was a young researcher roughly 20 years ago. The second challenge is the need to strengthen our focus on societal outcomes and impacts of research. As a research manager, I regularly engage the support of lawmakers and policymakers. They are quickly impressed with credentials and the technical expertise of our scientists. However, the curriculum vitae of our scientists will not make policymakers dig into their pockets. For an understandable reason, lawmakers are naturally supportive of activities directly benefiting their constituents. Policymakers, in turn, are moved by activities addressing urgent national exigencies and programs. Hence, I learned to align or adapt our R&D activities to such priorities. That means making the R&D outputs helpful to the National Rice Program and its immediate targets, directly afflicting the rice farmers. I learned early on that the key to getting more funding was to be relevant to national priorities and agenda. I left the Philippines in 2008 after 8 years of leading PhilRice and 14 years after returning from graduate studies. I then expatriated to Malaysia for 5 years and then 6.5 years in Vietnam. Both countries, R&D had their eye on societal outcomes and impacts beyond the output. In Malaysia in particular, the Malaysian Agricultural Research and Development Institute, R&D outputs were instantly scaled for farmers' use or commercialized. The outputs does not end in a research paper or a prototype. The researcher has to pursue it until it is scaled or commercialized. Commercialized products often mean additional incomes for researchers and the institution. In Vietnam, where research support was very limited, they fast-tracked the scaling of outputs that can improve the productivity and competitiveness of their industries. This included those copied or adapted from research done in analogous conditions in other countries. Outcome and impact should then be top of our minds. Many of our R&D institutions, unfortunately, are not getting enough support because much of their work resonates little with the ongoing programs and efforts of the government. The relevance of their output could arise only in 5 to 10 years if someone initiates and diligently pursues its upscaling and commercialization. Worse, it could be commercialized or scaled in other countries instead. The government programs, policies, and field operations can be done with minimal, if not without, inputs from these R&D institutions. In the Department of Agriculture, I have pointed out time and again the lacuna between our research practices and immediate needs of our programs. This puts us in a bind when we try to justify higher budget allocations for the agricultural R&D. We need societal outcomes and impact in the Philippines, and our R&D actions must focus on this. The third challenge, we have to counter policies that undermine support to research for development and innovation. Examples of this are our policies on food self-sufficiency versus food security, and policies contradictory to high farm income, productivity, and competitiveness. Beyond the need for R&D to be relevant, we have policies that are draining the resources that could otherwise be channeled towards R&D and innovation. Our endless quest to be self-sufficient costs our country a lot. Protectionist policies are blinding us to market realities. They keep our farmers' productivity and income low, and our agriculture industries uncompetitive globally. It is high time we focus on making rice farming profitable for our farmers and have them diversify to globally competitive agriculture products. It is time to invest in crops and industries where we have competitive advantage. In closing, given these challenges, we need you to come home to help us fight this hand-to-hand combat for reforms. We do not lack good plans. In fact, we have excellent plans. We probably have the best plans in Southeast Asia. But our inability to pursue the needed policy reforms and implement our plans properly hamper us. We have to reform a bureaucracy. We need you to join the bureaucracy so we can reform it from within. We need you to influence our policymakers to write the policies of our cause and maybe craft proposed legislations. Important decisions and actions are being made where good technical inputs are needed. Again, thank you for giving me this chance to share my views, and good day to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian. So there you go. We need to upscale and commercialize our products. So let me introduce our next speaker. Can I have the next slide, please? So our next discussant is Dr. Jose Maria Ochave. He is the Corporate Vice President, Business Development Group from Unilab. Let us all welcome Dr. Ochave.
Magandang gabi po at magandang araw sa inyo lahat. Unang-una, I just want to correct, I'm not a doctor.
Sorry po.
My background is chemical engineering and law. You know, although I took my master's of law, sa abroad, and right now po, my position is I'm senior vice president in Unilab and also the president of RightMed and Pharex, So I'm very much in the in the pharmaceutical industry. Let me just also say where I'm coming from, because it's important so that you can contextualize, because I may be a little irreverent and you may not like some of the things that I will say, but it's born out of probably my background. While I'm with the private sector, I've been with helping government for a long time, since 1995 when I came back. So I've been with DOST Biosafety Committee since 1996. And I've been with the PCHRD Governing Council since about 15 years ago. So medyo po ako, so I can see also my high school is Philippine Science, and I was under DOST scholarship for a long time. And that's the reason why I'd like to think that I'm very much part of the science sector, despite the fact that I went to the other college as well after. Now, when I was invited to speak po and then to be a discussant, and I saw the topic, I immediately said yes, not because of the science part, but because I saw activism there. So in my mind, I said, finally, the scientists have decided to engage, in the public forum and aggressively engage. For those of you who know me also, there's a special reason why activism actually is very attractive to me. So I hope that this is something that we will pursue, PASE will pursue, not alone, but also with others, because in activism, you need alliances. You cannot do it alone. Now, let me just have some, I don't have a presentation po na PowerPoint presentation. Let me just share with you some thoughts. The pandemic, of course, is an unfortunate period in our history, but I tend to look at the opportunities that the pandemic has created, and I think from a science standpoint, it has created a lot of opportunities. For once, science was at the forefront. I remember during the early dark days of the pandemic, when there were a lot, nobody knew how to address the pandemic, how to address the virus. And there were a lot, and I can tell you, I was receiving Viber messages, text messages from everyone, proposing certain ways to address the problem, which they found in the social media. And during those early days, I knew, because I was talking to several scientists, medical scientists, and people from some government agencies, and they were really desperate at the time, primarily because some of the decisions being made were decisions not based on science at all. These were decisions sometimes that people got because they saw something on the internet. And that's the fundamental problem in this day and age. The presence of unscientific or even ascientific thinking, which is predominant in the social media, and which infects not only the population at large, but also, unfortunately, even our decision makers. But fortunately, we were able to recover, in the sense that the scientists, the medical scientists, the statisticians were able to take charge, and people started to listen to them. So what the pandemic did was to put science at the forefront. Now, what we do next after the pandemic to make that irreversible is something that depends on us. So people have a general appreciation now of what science is, but again, we are faced with a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of unscientific thinking in the social media. But at the very least, during the pandemic, science was at the forefront. Okay. Now, second point po. When we speak of science here in the Philippines, I always get this sense that you always speak of science in terms of science in the academe and science in government. Marami pong nangyayaring siyensya sa industriya. There's a lot of science happening in the industry. In this day and age, you will not survive and you will not expand as a company if you do not have science, at least science there, somewhere there, or even at the center of your operations, whether it's IT, whether it's marketing science, whether it's hard sciences, whether it's pharmaceutical science in our case, but there has to be science. And I must say that it's not, every industry will have science there. The only problem is that the scientists in the industry are never heard. For two reasons. Number one, they're not the heads of the organizations. They're not the heads of the corporations. Ang biruan nga dyan, yung mga top dun sa eskwela, they become professors and teachers, And then those who who do not do well, they end up being sales and marketing people. But in the end, in companies, they end up being presidents of those companies. So the reality is, while there is a lot of scientists, inside the corporations, embedded in corporations here, in companies here, their voices are not sometimes heard outside of the company. Why? Because what you get and what you see and who engages with you are people who are not the scientists themselves, but the presidents who probably will not be scientists themselves. Now, so let's stop talking about science purely as an academic or a government monopoly. If science is to progress here, industry will have to be part of it. That's the reality. As long as we're in a free market, I've been to Cuba several times. I've been to Cuba 3 times, and I'm really impressed, by the level of science that they have, despite the scant resources that they have, the minimal resources that they have. They're the ones who are very much advanced in biotechnology. They have developed vaccines for cancer, for lung cancer, despite problems in resources. Why? Because education is free. There are a lot of PhDs. They're doing well. So they've invested a lot on the human resource, on the human capital. So it's something that is worth looking at, and something that we should also look at beyond the borders of just the US and the Europe. China is there, of course, Russia is there, but US remains to be, of course, a core partner. But we have to look beyond. But we're not. The problem is we're not a state. We're not a socialist country. We're still a free market. So in a free market, the last I've seen is that in a free market economy, while initial scientific researches are being done probably through public grants, the translation of those innovations in the public sphere are actually made in the private sector or pursued by the private sector. So the private sector remains to be important here, which brings me to the Philippine Innovation Act. I just took a look at this morning. It doesn't, pardon my irreverence here, but it will not solve the problem. Essentially, it's just creation of a committee. But what struck me was there were 25 members of the National Innovation Council and only one from the private sector. Most of the members are the secretaries of the different government agencies, government departments. And we all know, really, my apologies, but we all know what happens to committees where the members are the secretaries. They send, most of the time, they send their representatives there. I don't think they will have the time really to attend every National Innovation Council meeting, for that matter. So the private sector, second point, the private sector is important. Let's not forget it. And please do not limit the private sector to public hearings. When you want something, you just say, okay, let's do a public hearing. Let's see. It's important that we engage the private sector in a sincere and a meaningful effort. Hindi lang yung pag meron na tayong programa, meron na tayong plano, o papatingin na natin sa private sector, kung anong tingin. And that holds true also for innovation programs and scientific programs. Let me go to my third point, the industry academic linkage, because that's close to my heart. First, what I tell my industry friends is, it is not the role of the university to develop people for you, or scientists specifically for your industry or for your company. The role of the university is to be able to teach them the fundamentals, to teach them the habits, to teach them how the integrity that you need in order to do science and all these things. But if you want people who will be developing for you, who will answer your specific needs, then you will have to invest, whether as a company or as an industry. And therefore, we need a lot of those. What if we have a petrochemical academy which is sponsored by the industry? We have a pharma academy sponsored by the industry. So sasaluhin na yan doon. And then that's where you do the expertise. You do develop further expertise. By the way, the fourth, so yan ho yung normally we have this apprenticeship program, etc. But the reality is that it's really more of a CSR on the part of the the companies. I'll be very honest with you, Sumar. They don't find, if you put a student in a company, what contribution will that student have anyway? But there was a suggestion this afternoon in the Department of Chemical Engineering in UP when we had this forum, no? And the suggestion was you get a PhD in the academy, The PhD, right now there are 20 PhDs in the Department of Chemical Engineering. Assign them, link them up to the with the industry, assign students there who will work with that PhD faculty, because it gives credibility to whatever will be done by that group, and industry will find value. So it shifts from being just a CSR to something that the industry itself will find, or the companies themselves will find valuable. And that's one way also of making sure also that our academic professors, also have a glimpse of what industry is doing. It opens the door, of industry to the academe, because otherwise that door will remain shut. The next point is the importance of secondary school.
Last one. Wrap it up for it.
Okay. The importance of secondary school. We talk about Khan Academy. You have Philippine Science High School. What if you use the Philippine Science High School teachers, ask them to do the digital, and then you expand science teaching all over. And then finally, 2 points more. One is IP. Don't rely too much on IP. If you look at the innovative countries, they started as copiers, but they improved from copying. And the other one, the last one, is the value of alliances in advocacy. This is where all these institutes or societies and scientists, I think we have to tap them if you want to pursue the science agenda. In the same way that the medical societies are very influential, I think it's about time that we tap the Institute of Chemical Engineers and all these different institutes, so that they become part of this process and not just be limited to annual ritualistic conventions discussing everything and everything else under the sun. So thank you very much. I have limited time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So there you go. We need alliances for activism. And don't forget that science is not just a focus in academia and government, but there is also science in industry. And now we move on to the last discussant, Valentin Reyes. He is the president of the UP Engineering Research Development Foundation Incorporated. Let us all welcome Valentin Reyes.
Thank you, Gladys, and thank you, President Mario, and past President Giselle, for the invitation to be a discussant tonight. Is my Word file showing, Gladys?
Yes, it is.
All right. So I don't have a PowerPoint file. I'll just share my key discussion points. And I chose to focus on 3 areas. The first is the dearth of SNT, MS and PhD faculty and researchers. The second has to do with the partnership among government, industry, and academe. And the third is something close to my heart, which is measures of success. So I'll start with the first one. Aside from the number of MS and PhD faculty and researchers, equal attention is needed on the quality of our postgraduates. And quality is a function of many factors, but I will mention 4 of them. Access to cutting-edge lab and testing facilities, especially for those coming from abroad, where they were exposed to this, and when they come back, their ability to build on their knowledge will depend on this sort of access. And of late, I have had this personal realization that access to high-performance computer facilities is a game changer for us in the local environment, because of the power and the speed. We're talking here of minutes as opposed to weeks or months of simulations. The third aspect of quality is, and I've experienced this, and I've observed this as a good way of developing the new people in the block is mentoring from professors and experts who can help our new postgraduates get up quickly on the learning curve. And finally, on the thought that the PhD and MS is really just the starting point of the next level of learning for them. We need continuing education funding support to keep them going up the learning curve. Now, quality in itself of our postgraduates is not enough. The other is the alignment of research initiatives of our researchers with specific needs and priorities of industry and government. And this is of primary import. And I will speak only in the context of UP College of Engineering because that's where my exposure is in ERDFI and in my own education as a UP graduate. There is a disconnect among these or between these for various reasons. One is lack of mutual understanding and agreements. In our dialogue with the faculty a year ago, we had a series of dialogues on this subject. There was a more inclination toward basic rather than applied research, knowledge for knowledge's sake, as opposed to doing something that makes a difference in society or the market. We also saw that there is a disconnect in the promotion criteria for faculty. So publications more than commercialization or market / societal success are given more weight with respect to incentivizing research initiatives. There is also the issue of matching the industry or the institution with the researcher, someone who has a genuine interest, compassion, and willingness to really put his or her time and effort in this particular need. And one aspect that has been thrown in is the principle of academic freedom. We want to give faculty and the researchers as much freedom to pursue their passion. The other part of alignment is that incentives and funding support for the cost of research may not be sufficient right now. Again, in the context of the college, for example, we have professorial chair awards which give about 10 to 15,000 additional per month income to faculty and researchers, and we sense that this is not sufficient to keep them going and to fund their initiatives beyond a certain point. Now, another aspect here, and I'll switch gears a little bit by talking on matching our science and technology graduates with jobs appropriate to their skills. The apprenticeship or on-the-job training as part of the curriculum, much like what the German model is, it's built into the subject matter or the course. And this could be in service of aligning industry needs and priorities with the science and technology curricula and vice versa. As Joey Chavi mentioned, bringing faculty to industry and government as expert consultants is also a very good strategy. We experienced this ourselves in Intel years ago. We had 3 professors from engineering, and one of them actually ended up establishing a career in the semiconductor industry, and he's now back in the university as a professor emeritus. So this works from my perspective. Of course, when you talk of matching, we also have to speak of competition with overseas jobs because of the comp and benefits difference, as well as local non-SNT jobs which offer higher compensation. So those are other factors that we have to deal with that get in the way of matching our science and technology graduates with jobs that are aligned with their skills. The last thing I'd like to speak about here is I think we should consider looking beyond just the basic SNT skills to other aspects of learning in this field of developing faculty, researchers, and students. I'm talking here of business know-how, marketing, human relations, which is so important, communication, A lot of engineers are known for being poor communicators, an ability to express their ideas in a clear and concise manner. And I'm also speaking here of values and attitudes, not just the skills, because if you're going to expect our graduates and our faculty to pursue lofty goals, as Secretary Pernia has described them, such as solving poverty or alleviating inequality. We need to have people who have love of country and love of neighbor as part of their values, to be passionate about this. So I'll move to R&D partnership among government, industry, and academe. So it's a tripartite partnership. Companies at the cutting edge of science and technology with existing R&D facilities or have the means to set these up locally are ideal partners for government. And here's where I agree totally with the initial thesis on establishing R&D as R&D centers in the country as a way to spur development. And to share the Intel experience, when I worked there years ago, we had an R&D line embedded in manufacturing. And as a manufacturing person, I was very much against it at the beginning when I didn't have the big picture, because space to me was equivalent to production capacity, and any square meters that I would give up for R&D means less capacity. But I realized that this is an effective formula for designing for manufacturability issues and getting them readily addressed through real-time interaction between the R&D people and manufacturing, which is a very critical relationship in the whole chain. Now, on their own, R1 universities will be challenged to sustain the continuous upgrading of their lab and testing facilities, and let alone operate and maintain these on top of academic duties of the faculty. So this is really where government and private partnership needs to come into play. Local infrastructure support to research facilities, equipment, and systems are also important. Power, for example, including the cost. We're the second highest cost of power in the region or in Asia. After sales service, for equipment, high-end equipment which need attention, and even environmental systems, for facilities working on chemicals, proper disposal, and ensuring that it's a sustainable process. And this gets worse the farther the location is from Metro Manila and the NCR. And so I think this has been discussed. Government needs to incentivize companies on their R&D expenditures for sustainability and continuous improvement as technologies develop. And this is based on the vital few priorities, meaning this has to be intentional and deliberate so that we don't spread ourselves thin across the different needs, but really identify what matters to government. And maybe you start with poverty and equality as the lofty vision and work our way from there. And these priorities need to be set in partnership with industry and academia, so that we're all in the same page and we can all identify with the same shared purpose. So lastly, I'd like to speak on measures of success in key performance indicators, and the principle that what gets measured gets done. So apart from tracking researches per million population, we need to measure the ability of researchers to meet the intended outcomes or results of the fund or the sponsor. And this is one of the things we're dealing with as we speak in ERDFI. We award about 130 chairs a year to professors, and part of their responsibility is to come up with research that will meet a need. And many times there is a disconnect, or it is not exactly what the sponsor is looking for. So it will also help to measure. Before I do that, I think that's a very critical performance indicator, because at the end of the day, if you want to spur research towards initiatives that will make either a market or a societal impact that serves the higher need, the lofty need, then we will have achieved the purpose of of that particular research. So lastly, it will also help to measure the quality of our faculty and students, in addition to tracking their numbers, and not just the research productivity. As I said, publications is a measure of success in promotions, but that may not be sufficient if the intent is to achieve social and societal impact or commercialization. That's it for me. Thank you. And good evening or good morning to everyone.
Thank you very much. So finally, so that's it. So now we move on to our Q&A. Okay, so we
So
and yes.
Yeah, Gladys. So yeah,
Go ahead.
so we can both facilitate this.
Yeah.
We have several avenues for questions, comments. You can raise your hand with the Zoom function. You can type your questions or comments on the chat, or if you want, just interject during the forum. So Gladys, we can look at this. So first of all, again, let me thank all our speakers and discussants. Really, we are looking here at many viewpoints, from the sky views to trees in the forest to different granularities and challenges. After all, like what Secretary Ernie used to say, this should have been done yesterday. So really, there's a long history of this, and we really appreciate the expertise and inputs of everyone. So with, of course, our remaining time, we would like to have a chance for questions and answers and more viewpoints. Again, the whole exercise here is we would like to formulate, we would like to come up with a position, a very strong white paper of the best recommendations to move forward. So Gladys?
Yes, there's a lot, actually a lot of comments already written in the chat box. So maybe we can start with one. We can share that to the audience if there's no question from right now.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I'm coming from Maryland, a neighbor of the president of PASE. I am Dr. Cabellian of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. I chair the research committee of the University of the Philippines Medical Alumni Society in America. Now, I would like to pose this question to the panel. About 3 years ago, in front of the UP president, Danilo Concepcion, I presented to them the difficulty of having research time for faculty. And then the President Concepcion says, you know what, Billy, I'm called Billy, by the way. Alam mo, wala pa tayong Nobel Prize winner eh. That was, tapos, at saka wala yata tayong CRISPR, which is this gene editing company, editing technology. So I was very disappointed to hear Secretary, well, it's not from the Secretary, but there were 31 patents coming from the Philippines. And I was wondering whether, I posed this initially in the initial discussion, whether the intellectual capacity of the Philippines is lacking and why. And maybe it is the educational atmosphere that doesn't develop the analytical mind of the Philippines. I also come from Ilocos, where tobacco is a product before, but apparently tobacco produces protein, and tobacco is the Novavax develops this protein antibody in tobacco, for which, if this can be developed, could be a big earner, as Dr. Octavio has mentioned. I am sorry for, he's irreverent, but I tend to ask direct questions and to see where we're going. And I really don't cater to publications where they just pad to become full professor. I really welcome the challenge of scientist Octave to make these scientific research really benefit society. So I'm just posing that general question.
Yes, I can see the Miss Attorney Ochave.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much po for that. I'm an IP lawyer, so let me and that is
Okay,
let me
sir.
respond. Let me respond to that. Let me respond to that po. There are many factors. One, it doesn't mean that there is less innovation going on, etc. It just means that one, the consciousness about patenting here is not as big. Even in private companies, not as big as in other countries, particularly the US. So the OST is just starting to, and the IPO are just starting to really make people aware, of what patents are. That's number one. Number two, I think it's the way that we crafted innovation here and we defined innovation. If you go around, and listen to all these presentations on innovation here, they start the discussion by saying innovation as in iPad, iPhone, etc., etc. That creates a very chilling effect, That's why what I've been saying, and I've been irreverent in this case, is that first, as the students, ako ho nung nasa Pisaya ko, we have two years na researches eh. And every time we will have researches, we don't know where to get those researches, those topics. But ask the students first to look at the patent databases, USPTO, EPO. Patents are territorial. Not all. If the patent is not filed here, it doesn't. It's not enforceable. But look at them. Ask the students, even high school, to put them into practice, copying what essentially is in the patent, and then that's the first step. And the second step is ask them to improve on it. So improve on it. So that creates incremental, innovation as an incremental improvement, and that creates, that jump starts, hopefully, the innovative thinking. So I think we did a disservice by just saying that innovation without defining what innovation is all about. It became so big that people could not relate to it.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. Now, let me call on Al Serafika.
Well, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay, Gladys?
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank all the discussants and the presenters tonight. Very, very diverse points of views indeed. It's kind of difficult to put my arm, even my mind around it, but I've been part of almost all of the aspects of the development. I mean, from the IP standpoint, Joey is talking about when I came back here as a balik scientist after being in the US for 24 years. I actually lived and breathed and survived on IP. I have 10 US granted patents and about managed a 66 patent portfolio for my biotech company that ran for 17 years before we sold the business in two pieces in Europe and in the US. And IP is essential. When I came back here in 2013, I asked everyone practically if they know how to commercialize technologies. And a lot of them said they don't. And when I asked them, do they know how to file a patent? They also don't. So practically the last 8 years that I've been here, I've been focused on technology commercialization with most of the scientists here in Paase as well as outside in UP and in LaSalle and in with USAID, right? So clearly it is a slow and ongoing process, guys. And I remember Ernie Pernia talking about us being as of our specializations and characteristics, and we kind of roll up our sleeves and try to do whatever we can. Where I am now, I'm actually having spent 7 years with the most scientists decorated in the National Academy of Science. I'm now helping out-of-school youths and alternative learning systems, the National STEM Bee with CP. I'm also still doing a lot of USAID stride work on our grantees for $500 million pesos that's been poured to mostly universities outside of Manila to commercialize some of their research so they can become models in their own regions. So I think I've seen the ecosystem here in the Philippines for the last 8 years. And all I really wanted is to recreate my environment after finishing my PhD in chemical engineering in New York in Rensselaer and starting my company in 1996. That is starting to emerge here, guys, 20 years later, 25 years later. It's 2021 now. But it is very critical, the last point of Secretary Ernie, in having the right type of government. Because let's not mince words. The right government is the engine for the plane to fly, as Joel illustrated to us. We're just chuchuas, or we're just backup singers, for lack of a better word, in our little pocket of endeavors that can really propel the whole science and technology ecosystem in the Philippines. But we all need the parts in order to fly. And for me, having the right pilot and the right crew, which is mainly both government and hopefully Fita Aldaba here, and continuing on, definitely more power to innovative technocrats in government like Fita. But we need more also from the private sector like Joey. And again, I'm very glad that we are here together in the interface and talking about this. We're still have yet to come up indeed of how the best way forward. I thought the NIC, the National Innovation Council, is the way forward, as Secretary Ernie Pernia and I had really discussed for the last 4 years while he was still the secretary. And clearly it is a work in progress, and the next administration would be another challenge for us, but we need to be there. We need to be relevant, impactful, and even noisier as ever, as Joey Ochave mentioned, for us to be noticed. And we caught their attention in the pandemic. Let's do more in terms of nation building, guys, in terms of being able to get our economy back in order. That's all I just want to say. I'm just really happy that everyone has participated in this. And I'm looking forward to more engagements moving forward beyond this week, of course. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Al.
Al.
So next speaker, may I call on Joel. So just a reminder, because of the limited time we have, can we allot 2 minutes?
Yes, I will go directly
Thank
to the
you.
point. And thank you, Billy, for raising that question. So to answer that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the intellectual capacity of Filipinos, that's for sure. I'm a product of UP as well, but I believe that it has to do with what universities in the Philippines value. And I'd like to speak specifically about the University of the Philippines because it's the national university. And I think I can do this fairly because I'm a product of UP. So UP really has to look inward and decide exactly what it values. And it needs to communicate that and to implement that structurally within the university. So for instance, if UP says that, oh, we value knowledge creation and we value knowledge-based value creation, which is innovation. By the way, that's the definition of innovation, is creating value or value creation. And value has a specific economic sense, and that is benefit per unit cost. So everybody can do innovation. But we are in the science field, so we are talking about science and technology-based value creation or innovation. So if UP decides that, well, today in the 21st century, we not only value knowledge assimilation for our students, but we value knowledge creation as well as knowledge-based value creation, then we should implement this. So in other words, we should appoint our faculty members not only as teachers, but we should actually designate in their appointment X% teaching and X% research, which is knowledge creation and knowledge-based value creation. UP has to make this decision. And I'm talking about UP because it's a national university and everybody else in the Philippines in terms of educational institutions look toward UP. It's kind of like the Walmart of the United States. Walmart is a very powerful and influential company. Whatever they decide, everybody kind of follows because they are the cutting edge company in the US. So it's the same thing. We have to make this value of knowledge creation and knowledge-based value creation implemented and practiced in Philippine institutions. And then the students will assimilate that. Then all of a sudden they'll be conscious about knowledge creation, about patents, intellectual property, startup companies, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Secretary Pernia.
Can I just say a couple of lines? Yes, I think I sounded a bit downbeat when I started my presentation.
Sure.
And the reason for that is, during the campaign, I mean, before the current president was elected, I already put in advancing knowledge, science, technology, and innovation as one of the 10-point agenda. So I thought that, it would really gain traction during his administration. And in fact, in the Philippine Development Plan 2017-2022, it is also a chapter by itself, advancing knowledge, advancing science, technology, and innovation. But to tell you frankly, never has the Philippine Development Plan been discussed in the cabinet meeting, and much less a discussion of science and technology and innovation. And so that is the kind of thing that made me a bit, downcast or downbeat about, what we are trying to do. But I think in recent years, there has been an outburst of energy and vibrancy coming from the PAASE. And maybe this might work. And especially if in the next administration, we get the right kind of president. It's really important that the president is cognizant, at least cognizant, appreciative, and so somewhat knowledgeable of the importance of science, technology, and innovation. So that is key to us, to science and technology and innovation to advance in the country.
Thank you so much,
funding
Secretary.
is important. Funding is also very important.
Yeah, thank you so much, Secretary Pernia. We really what you emphasize there in terms of leadership boils down really to what can be implemented during their term, and especially things that have been done in the past, how it can be continued. With our remaining time, really, we've heard of many viewpoints. I'll just say that if we can emphasize solutions, immediate and effective recommendations that we can come up with a position paper. Let's say, I think we have probably about 5 or 6 more comments possible before we close the session. If you can limit your response to 1 or 2 minutes, let me then ask our discussants and panelists and speakers to give another round of suggestions, discussions, and comments. So let's start with Giselle.
Thank you, Gobet. I'd like to propose that based on our GDP of 350 billion US dollars, am I right? Is that the level before the pandemic? You could then,
Yeah.
yes, you could then compute the 0.5% of GDP. And I had done this when I was UP VPAA. And I had, well, by the computation, it would be about 75 billion pesos for GERD, gross expenditure for R&D. So the question is, how are you going to spend the 75% for R&D? And I think there have been excellent suggestions from USEC Leo Sebastian on incentives to provide foreign-based Filipino scientists and engineers to come home with the right facilities and equipment. And this has already been done in UP with the National Science Complex and the ERDT complex. There is an excellent suggestion from SVP Joey Ochave to provide incentives for industry. This is also strongly proposed by President Val Reyes of ERDFI. And well, during our term in Quezon Hall, we actually established this externship programs with industry. So the point, Joey, is there isn't enough interest from industry to pick up research in the university at an earlier research stage. So there's got to be a coming together of industry and academia. Even as we reach out to industry, then, you know, with industry, risk their investment because you always look at the ROI. I would like to stop there because
You know,
there's more discussions tomorrow.
Sorry,
Yes.
any industry that asks for additional incentives, I think will not be serious, you know. So they, you know, I'm not asking for support for industry. What we're asking is a better way of engaging government and the academe, where it becomes a partnership really, and not just you know. So any company, any industry that asks for support, you know, from government, I think is, you know, we should be able to compete, no?
But Joey, in Singapore, biotech is very high level biotech as described by Dr. Leon, expressing proteins, spike proteins in tobacco.
But you know what? But you know what? We're also discussing
it's being done now. In UPLB, there has been a research to express cocosin, okay, the coconut protein in an expression system, but not in tobacco, for example. So
we're also
level of technology matters.
So we're also discussing, the private sector is also discussing with other companies, you know,
yes,
along that area. Biotech, I mean, I can speak for Unilab. We've been talking to so many companies, no? Partnership, you know. We're not interested in any capital infusion. We're interested in technology partnerships, you know. And it's available, you know. If the private sector, if the industry wants to do it, they have it. It's just a matter of, you're right, you know. Unfortunately, we're the ROI counts a lot as well. You know, we cannot enter something that, but you know, it's an initial investment that's there for about 3 years or 4 years. Na invest ka lang. But sometime there has to be a time when you will have the margins and you will have the returns. You know, so it's just a matter of computing that. You know? But we're always on the lookout for technology partners.
So 1:1 PPP between biotech and government. You know. A 1:1 investment. So these are models that exist in advanced countries.
Well, that's one option.
Yes. Anyway, thank you.
So thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Joey. So another suggestion could be formalizing a science advisory committee. There is probably one that exists directly with the president or directly with the Senate, but as a high-level cabinet science advisory committee beyond the secretary level could be very strong in terms of guiding and implementing. And this could be either a new appointment or a new committee working in government, but a science advisory committee on a very, very high level. It's a good suggestion.
But you know, the one suggestion, and this is to the, you know, what government, what the secretaries don't probably understand, you know, is they have the bully pulpit. You know, don't talk to industry associations. Talk to the CEOs of individual companies. You know, because it becomes a secretary to a particular CEO, then that becomes a commitment. You know, the government is still government. You know, the private sector always looks at government, but it has to be the secretary, because private sector will not go to the government and ask for kasi ayaw ng na presentable kasi because government has always distrust of the private sector. You know, so if we're the ones who will go to the secretary and say we have this proposal, etc. You know, ano yan? May iwas yan. But if it becomes a secretary asking for just a lunch, just a lunch with the CEO of specific companies and asking them, where can you help in terms of sciences? That's huge. Whether it's DTI secretary, DOST secretary, the position still counts of the secretary. Don't talk to industry associations, because you will only get the executive directors of industry associations who have who cannot commit at all, and people will not be disclosing. Remember, in an industry association, those are competitors. They will not
understand what you're
disclose to each
saying,
other,
Joey.
diba?
So really a direct communication between the industry CEOs and the secretary, not through associations. Yeah, very good. Al, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to implement one program that I've been a participant in the United States. I received an SBIR in 1997. This is a small business innovative research grant for 100,000 when I just started my company barely 9 months before that. And it allowed me to raise another million with that money that the government gave me. And I was able to raise another 7 million 3 years after that. And of course, the company expanded beyond those 5 years of having initiated with a seed grant. And when Giselle was talking about expanding our R&D expenditures to 75 billion, right now the current expenditures of DOST is about 20 billion. And there's another 7 billion coming out of CHED. And we still are very bogged down in procurement in terms of scientific equipment, which we've been trying to solve for the last 8 years with USAID Stride effort together from Giselle all the way down to Danicon now. It's still a problem. So to me, my issue is that can we rebuild our economy in the Philippines using the SBIR model that's been implemented in the US successfully across all departments? That's what created DARPA, the Advanced Research Program of Defense, because they devote 7 billion of their budget, 1% of their budget, to do R&D, as mandated by the SBIR law. So again, that's private sector involvement, Joey, in its purest sense, but it's government initiated and seeded, and it's scientific because it needs the science community to be participant for the innovative research aspect of the small business.
So Al, if I'll interpret that, that's basically asking for a percentage of budget, a direct percentage of budget that's allocated to research, and I've seen it. It incentivizes a lot of things that is not so much beholden with a very specific industry. I know Fita raised her hand, and I'd like to give some room to her, and then to Secretary Pernia, and then to Joel. So Fita.
Thank you, Gobet. Well, we just want to highlight the fact as well that right now what we're counting is only the R&D expenditures of government, but I'm hoping we'll also be able to monitor the R&D spending of the private sector. While I was in PEDS, we conducted a survey trying to see the R&D behavior as well as the R&D investments of companies, and it's really even very, very little as well. And hence, I think it's really very important that for us to really work together, all sectors working together as we build the ecosystem, and as we do that, make a case in terms of attracting more companies towards putting their investments into R&D. But I guess there's now a strong momentum given the pandemic that we just went through. And second, on the point, I mentioned in my presentation as well that the plan to build an AI R&D center. So the secretary actually, we arranged meetings directly with the owners, with the CEOs of Union Bank, the Aboitiz, Ayala, Gokong Wei, we're also trying to arrange one with Mr. Pangilinan. But again, that center is not really going to be for profit, but what we're looking at really is there's going to be some social objectives as well as the nation building aspects. So we're trying to attract more companies to invest in the center, because we need to support the digital transformation, how micro, small, and medium enterprises could transform themselves as well, and how we could provide education not only to the students but as well as to the teachers in the area of AI. So those are primarily the social objectives that we want to achieve via this center. But at the same time, of course, there would be some consulting, R&D partnerships with different companies, so that the center would be able to generate income and sustain its activities.
Mhm. Excellent, Fita. I really love that, and I think that is the future. No need for us to reinvent the wheel, but really grab on to where the technology is leading. Excellent. Ernie, Secretary Ernie.
Just
I'd like
very
to hear
quickly,
more.
Gobet. We are putting together a white paper, right? It's very important in the white paper that we suggest that the National Innovation Council should be a trilateral kind of, in terms of the membership. There should be government, of course, industry, and academia. Right now, it's just only one from the private sector, and the rest are government. So I think it should be trilateral. Let's put that in. I think that's a very important thing. And if the upcoming president is cognizant or appreciate science and technology, I'm sure it will be carried.
I
Because
appreciate
National Innovation Council, that's going to be the engine. I mean, one of the main engines that will promote innovation.
I appreciate that, Secretary Ernie. So let us make sure that that is a strong pillar going to that white paper, because we all recognize here that it is a voice that is missing in the current structure.
Right.
Maybe represented by an organization, but specific individuals appointed from academia will be quite important. Joel, I'd like to give room to you to.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, let me articulate the recommendations I'd like to offer. The first one is definitely develop and establish the globally based technology research and development sector in the Philippines. And this, of course, would require the guidance and, of course, the cooperation of the DTI, BOI, PESA, DOST, DA, NEDA, PAASE, NAST, and so on and so forth. That's one. Second is develop the R1 or the Research One universities across the Philippines, whether it's one Research One university per region or one Research One university per clusters of regions. It's important to do that. The third one is to establish the Philippine Association of Research Universities, because they have to have a way of self-determination of practicing that so that they can really represent their interests before the government and other stakeholders. The fourth one, which thanks Attorney Joey for referring to this, there is that vibe in the Philippines that the government and the private sector distrust one another. And I don't really know what the root cause of that is because I've been away for a long, long time. But there needs to be trust building between the Philippine government and the private sector, because both of them really are working toward the same goal, which is for national development. Both are necessary. And lastly, this is directed to the University of the Philippines. And again, as the national university, is for UP to refocus and to put into practice its values for knowledge creation and knowledge-based value creation. Thank you. And I can submit this in writing to elaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And please don't hesitate to put things on the chat box as well, or send emails later on. And this is a whole week of discussions, talking points, and so on. So I think Yusek Leo raised his hand too. So
Yeah,
Leo.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. My suggestion is that I think we should look at the paper by former Secretary NEDA Secretary Canlas and also NEDA Secretary Pernia, because the last part of my presentation was on policies. And if we would like to bring in private sector or bring in more funding to research, I think we have to look at really the policies that we now have in the Philippines. And I'm worried because having risen from the rank, from researcher to research manager to now involved in policy and implementation, that many of our presidential candidates, nobody is talking about science basically. And they're all promising everything about in agriculture. They want our farmers to get all this, that. They want to be self-sufficient in all these things. These things are worrisome to me, having worked in agriculture for a long time. I've worked on rice self-sufficiency for a long time. And I tell you, you cannot make a rice farmer rich. It is impossible, and it is very rare if it ever happens. So if we really want to help our agriculture, self-sufficiency in rice is not the direction that we should be having. It should be improving their productivity, their income, diversifying their livelihood. And we need innovation. That is where, because the moment we keep on focusing on the issues that most of our presidentiables are now talking about in agriculture, there's no money in research in those areas. There's no money, I tell you. So whoever you think will be a good presidentiable now, they are not speaking about science. They're not talking about investing in science. They're only talking about pampering our farmers, and that is not the right direction, unfortunately. So I think we have to, maybe we can spend time to look at the policies that we can advocate, and at least if PAASE wants to position itself, let's position ourselves to make sure that some of them will carry in their platform whatever we want. And I do not mean any color. So it doesn't matter to me. I've been in government for a long time. I've served many presidents, and they're all the same. They promise, they start, and never follow unless you work hard from within. And that is what I've been doing. I always work hard from within and reform whatever I can.
Yeah. Thank you, Leo. Thank you. And that's a very good reminder. And also for the revisiting the position papers of Secretary Pernia, Director Pernia, and Canlas. So we don't have much time. We really went over our time. I just like to give a few summary. Yes, Val, I'll give you a few minutes, to summarize your points.
I think just one quick comment that, the big caveat here is every term is good for 6 years. So whatever program that we conceive must be something that we will have a very high confidence level of being implementable within the 6-year period, because anything after that can easily change, depending on the winds.
We agree with you. We agree, Val. And also, if somehow we can make bulletproof, foolproof programs that are not easily touched or modified by succeeding administrations, these are some very important points. So I would like to actually give time to President Mario Mario to summarize and brief the audience on what the rest of the week will look like. Gladys, you'll be appropriate to also add some points.
Yes, thank you, Gobet. Actually, we have a rapporteur for tonight, and it's Professor Angeline Lau from De La Salle University. After she gives her report, we will talk briefly about what's in store for the next few nights. Thank you, Professor Lau.
Thank you, sir. So pleasant day to all. I'll make this short. Today we heard the discussants from NEDA, DTI, DA, and the industries mention the challenges they face in establishing a robust R&D ecosystem. So they shared best practices they learned from other countries that can be embraced or implemented and propose solutions on how to address these challenges. So to summarize, one of the main challenges that they mentioned is the SNP, human capital development, the challenge to build an educated and scientific manpower, and the challenge to sustain the support for human resources. So to enhance the quality of higher education and research, partnerships between Philippines and foreign universities should be encouraged and supported. Tax incentives was also mentioned that can be given to enterprises to attract them to take part in building in public-private partnership for setting R1 universities. And programs are needed to attract more Filipino researchers, especially young Filipino scientists, to conduct R&D activities. Learning best practices from other countries, it was emphasized by the discussant that at the least, good research direction should be set, and attractive research funding, patent incentives, and research facilities should be provided. You heard that support R&D activities and attract capital investments, the partnership or engagement between university and private sectors like industry or global R&D companies should be strengthened. It's also important to link research work to national priorities by improving the societal outcome and impact of our R&D. That means it's making R&D work relevant. This can be integrating AI technology in the R&A work, or it can be proposing science-based decision and strategies in addressing and resolving COVID-related issues. So in this type of setups, researchers will be able to carry out basic research where industries or government agencies will be able to commercialize and use the findings from advanced research. So this will be like a cycle, making R&D activities sustainable. Another challenge that was mentioned by the discussant is the policies that undermine limited support to R&D and innovation. So there exist policies that may drain our resources and might or can or should be rechanneled to R&D. So one example being mentioned is the free tuition program being implemented at SUC that may financially constricted R&D activities. So science should be allowed to dominate in policymaking, and it was highlighted or emphasized by several of our discussants that our national leaders and policymakers who submerge their self-interest in favor of the public interest and should see the value of science and technology advance the development of our country. And during the open forum, some of the suggestions mentioned to improve the STI ecosystem in the Philippines include having a high-level science advisory committee of the president, a direct communication between department secretaries and CEOs of the companies, and perhaps also grabbing on current resources we have and upscale from them and become a competitive player in the market. So for day one of the event on a week of pro-science activism in finding common ground toward building a robust STI ecosystem in the Philippines, I think we have a good start with speakers and discussants who are truly influential and have strong voices in our country. So I'm really excited and I look forward for more discussion in the next 4 days. So giving back the floor.
Thank you very much, Angie. It's getting very late in the Philippines, so we would like to thank everyone for being patient. And this has been a very illuminating, very engaging session. And this is just the first night or the first day. So just imagine the next 4 days or nights. And so we'd like to thank all our speakers, all our esteemed discussants. Everything that's been talked about today will be on our report. We have actually two scribes, Dr. Lulu Harold and Dr. Larry Ilag. And we have, of course, our rapporteur, Professor Angeline Lau. So I'll give back the floor to our moderators, Gladys and Gobet.
Thank you, Mario. So yes, again, we would like to recognize the scribes, Lulu Harold and Larry Ilag, and with the help of Angel, our student assistant, and also would like to thank our technical staff, Richmond and JV, for helping us. Okay, and we would like to invite you tomorrow, and we would like to present the speakers and the discussants. I think there's a slide. Can Richmond please share that slide?
What's this?
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you very much. There's a lot of comments here in the chat box. So we will be sending the all the discussions. We will be sending a summary of what we discussed tonight, okay, to our PAASE group email, and then also the papers that Secretaries Peña and Secretary Canlas presented today, and all of the even Dr. Val Reyes's papers. Everything will be available. Okay, hold on, please. Okay, so I hope you got really excited, and then we have 4 more days to discuss this week, a week of pro-science activism, finding common ground for building a robust post-COVID STI ecosystem in the Philippines. So tomorrow we have 5 speakers, okay, 5 discussants from University of the East, Dr. Esther Garcia, our President Pascual, okay, former president of the RUP system, Dr. Tirsoron Quillo, the president of the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges, Dr. Emiliano Bolangaita, head of Carnegie Mellon University, Australia, and Dr. Teodoro Arbosa, the executive vice president of the UP system from 2017 to 2021. And we will hear them tomorrow with our 2 moderators, Dr. Luisa Verata and Dr. Cristina Binag. Please join us. You will use the same Zoom link, the same passcode, and please don't forget to ask questions and make some more comments. So yes, that's it. Gobet, I want to say something
Thank
else.
you so much, and I'd like to again congratulate all of you for your accomplishments, your commitment, and let's make something big for the Philippines. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, can we have a picture?
Thank you.
And can everybody, so hold on. It has to be gallery. Ano? Okay. First slide. Hold on. Smile. Hold on, one more. The second, okay. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Thank you very much. That's it, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good
good to see all of you.
Bye.
Baste, how are you?
Bye.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Gabat. Thank you,
Bye.
Gladys.
Bye. See you.
Bye. Hello.
Oh, great. You're playing the journal. Everyone, we encourage you to support the journals at Linis INJ. This is our Paase journal.
Very nice.
Nice.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gobert.
Thank you. See you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gladys, good job. Thank you, Mario.
Great job, both
Really
of you.
excellent,
Thank you.
excellent organization.
Thank you
I hope
very
I hope
much.
you like the journal
Yes.
video that
Yeah, it's
they
very
put
excellent.
together.
You know, we're getting very professional. You know, even the slides. You know, the posters, the videos. Very, very professional.
I think especially the journal, there's a lot of things to look forward to.
That's
We
right.
already have a DOI mechanism, so that means each publication will have a life of its own, posted online,
That's
direct
right.
object linker. And then
Wow,
secondly,
yeah.
I noticed the publication piece. It's really a bargain. This is an open access journal.
It
And
is.
we're only
Yes.
talking about $100 in the US.
That's
And
right.
how much? Few thousand pesos. It is a bargain. So I hope really it becomes popular to the SUCs, the HEIs in the Philippines, but even Paase members in the US. They'll take advantage of this.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Write a review.
Thank you.
So that it will become popular.
Very successful.
Very
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Take care,
you.
y'all.
Thank you, Mario.
Extended to almost 3 hours, but it's all worth it. Yeah. It's all
Worth
worth
it.
it.
There are a lot of
Yeah. That's right.
See you tomorrow. Bye bye.
See you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Richmond. Okay,
Thank you,
bye.
Richmond. You know, JB.
Mario, maraming salamat. Okay?
Maraming salamat. Maraming
Yes.
salamat.
Sorry, nag-extend.
Yeah,
Hindi
it's
pa ako.
okay. It's all
Nahiya
okay.
pa ako to bat in.
Thank you. We'll have dinner one night.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.